we have to guess when record gets pushed.
There you go. I just saw it pop up in the corner.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us, everybody, for this episode of what we've been calling Sup With Me Tonight. This is just a fun little casual series that we've been doing while we're all off work for the COVID pandemic. So it's really just a chance to meet people and say hi and break bread. We've had a few different episodes on various kinds of conversations and various kinds of topics. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do this was to be able to connect with people that we know well, like our friend Skye here, as well as people that we don't know at all. And I've never met either of you. We've got Frankie and Karol on the Zoom with us here. You three know each other fairly well from some, maybe does somebody want to give us a little rundown of how you know each other?
Maybe I should, I guess. This is my background. Bob Wicks and I, Shakespeare and Saskatchewan fans who remember Bob, we both, unbeknownst to each other, got invited to the International Fellowship in 2015 that the Shakespeare's Globe in London would put on every 2 or 3 years. And actually, as far as I understand, back me up on this, ladies, I don't think they've had one since we did it in 2015, as far as I know.
They didn't.
Yeah, I think
in terms of change, artistic leadership, they just hadn't done another one yet. So as of now, we were the last ones to do it. And when I went there, that's where I met Frankie and Karol. And it was a collection of over 20 artists from around the world who all had a passion and love for Shakespeare. And we were there for about a month, just shy of a month, I guess. Yeah. And then the three of us got to reconvene because a bunch of us got along so well. We decided we should keep trying to find ways to do stuff together. So we did a residency in Mexico with one of the other fellows, Renata. And so we met in summer of 2016 and did a collective international collaboration on the Comedy of Errors.
Very cool, very cool. And Skye, where you calling from and what you eating?
I'm here, Saskatoon, Treaty 6, but I'm not in my house. I'm in my mom's. One of the benefits of all this time is I can be with her. She just got out of successful hip surgery. So my comfort food are these amazing whole wheat crackers that she makes. I got a bowl of them here. So I picked those. And I'm drinking from our local brewery, my favorite, 9 Mile. And that's their 9 Mile Ale. So that's what I'm saying.
And we fully expect a 9 Mile sponsorship now.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's real. Frankie, where are you calling from, and what's your food of choice there?
I'm in Sydney, so it's not Sup With Me tonight, Sup With Me this morning. I've got a coffee because it is 9 a.m., but it's from a mug. I'm very bad at showing. This is the International Actors Ensemble, which is the company that we formed after working together at the Globe, and through which we performed in Mexico. And it's got a little quote on the back from Comedy of Errors, the show that we did. And I'm eating a croissant because this time last year I was in Paris, so it's a little memory to that. There's going to be no delicate way of eating this. I'm going to make a mess. I apologize in advance. But as you guys pointed out, it is 5 p.m. somewhere. So just in case, I've got a bottle of Australian whiskey, just in case I get tempted at 9 in the morning. I've got a big day ahead of me. I've got students to give feedback to and a company meeting. So the whiskey could help.
Especially with the students. That's always, you need the whiskey for the students. And Karol, what about yourself?
I'm in Brazil, São Paulo, and I'm having a waffle with condensed milk. Is that right in English? I don't know how to say it in English. And white chocolate powder, because I'm on a diet, so why not? And that was the last one that we had in my house, and I thought that would be a great excuse to have the last one without sharing with my boyfriend. So that's why I chose it. And I have rum and Coke just because I love rum, and I know Skye shared the same love with me. So I'm having rum and Coke, Kraken. So you can get like sponsorship from Kraken as well.
Excellent.
Oh yeah, lime burners. We can get sponsorship. We're good. Let's make
Across the
it.
board.
Do you think they would send us a crate from where you're at?
Look, I'll pitch it to
No.
them.
Awesome.
You want a vegan croissant too?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what I'm
What
calling
about
from
you?
just what's that, Skye?
I said, what about you?
I'm from just outside of Saskatoon, so I'm on my little farm, my little acreage out here. I finally managed to set one of these up on the porch so that we could actually hear the birds in the background, which might drive us nuts, but we'll see how it goes. And I'm having the first tomato sandwich of the season, which in Australia and Brazil probably means nothing, but in Canada, the first tomato sandwich of the season is kind of a godsend. So that's what I'm having right now.
Is that a seasonal thing because tomatoes don't grow in the frost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We sort of get one window to eat all of the sort of hot weather vegetables, and it's right about now. So it doesn't last very long. Yeah. So I'm curious, what's life like being an artist where you folks are at right now in this wild world? I mean, I kind of have a bit of a sense of what it's like in Canada, and Skye and I chat on a regular basis, but I'm curious, what's it like? How's everybody doing?
Carol, how are you going in Brazil?
Oh God, I don't even know where to start. It's not good. I mean, to be an artist in Brazil, to be especially an actor in Brazil, it's quite difficult because we don't have a lot of support, especially financial support. And with this president that we have now, it's worst. And now with the pandemic and everything that is going on, and a lot of people dying here in Brazil because politicians really don't care. Everything it's worst. So we don't know how it's gonna be after it. But we have a lot of artists going online to, I don't know, to make a performance and shows and dramatic readings. A lot is going on online for free. So we don't have money. We are not earning money, but we are doing things online, and I think that it's making us more, I don't know, more of a group. We are like getting together. We are knowing each other better, like from different groups and different kind of artists, and we're talking more about art. So it's good, but it's not good.
And so in Brazil, is there, like, pre-pandemic, so there's not a lot of regularly operating funded theaters? Is it fairly ad hoc, or?
It's really hard to get like funding here in Brazil. You need to, before the pandemic, you had to like make a project and send to the government, and they would say, yeah, you can do it, or no, you can do it. And then if they say, okay, that sounds cool, that's good enough, you are allowed to go and ask for companies like, I don't know, beer company, or to, I don't know, anything. You can go and ask for the money. And then this company gets like a tax reduction. I don't know if that's the right thing to say. But it's easy to have like a project like approved. You can go and ask for money for the companies. What is hard is to get the money from the companies, because what they want is, they want famous people. They want famous musicals. They don't want Carol doing Shakespeare. They want someone famous doing, I don't know, Chicago, or I don't know, Hamilton, or something like that. And that's why it's difficult. And I guess it's gonna be harder after this pandemic. But what happens in Brazil as well is that most of the theater companies, they do it they get money from themselves. They pay for it and they go and do it. So that's how it is here.
And Is there a lot of is Shakespeare very common in Brazil, or is that pretty uncommon?
No. It's getting more common now. I think people are starting to like Shakespeare in Brazil right now because I remember when I was at university like 10 years ago, and my friends, actors, used to say Shakespeare is boring. I don't want to do Shakespeare. I don't want to play Shakespeare because it's boring. It's old. So that's how people in Brazil see Shakespeare. Most of the people in Brazil see Shakespeare. So when you have Shakespeare in a theater, you don't have a lot of audience because they don't want to see something boring because they think it's boring. I don't know why that happened. I guess it's because a few years ago we were trying so hard to have our own theater, like scene, like that's Brazilian author, and that's the Brazilian way to do theater and to act, that we kind of ignored everything from abroad. And Shakespeare was one of those authors that we ignored for so long. And now people are starting to realize he's a genius. Maybe we should do it. Let's play Shakespeare. So now we have a lot of actors and companies trying to play Shakespeare, but the audience still sees it in a typical way. They think it's boring.
There's actually some fairly similar things in Canada too with, I mean, there's a lot of Shakespeare that gets done in Canada because it's a pretty colonial place, but in terms of funding and things like that, there's many decades where huge focus is put on new Canadian plays and creating a Canadian canon and those kinds of things. But I mean, we're a very, very young country. So, Canadian theater is younger than I am, really. It's interesting. And Frankie, how's life as an artist there?
Well, look, I mean, it's not good, but I want to always keep that in perspective because I'm well aware of how lucky we are over here, and particularly in terms of the pandemic, our stats are significantly lower. However, in terms of theatre work, it has of course halted completely. We were in the middle of performing The Crucible and then in rehearsing Othello when this all happened, and of course that got shut down. We had a meeting at 10 a.m. in the morning before going on stage, and they said, sorry, it's not going to happen. So we all went to the pub, naturally. And then we've had the company I work for, Sport for Jove Theatre Company, has had every other show cancelled, this year. So there are some companies rehearsing, but there's all these provisos around, well, we may have to stop. But in terms of funding, we're in a similar position. It's not sport, so nobody cares. I work for an independent theatre company, and we, despite producing some of the most acclaimed work in the country, we don't ever get any funding, which is deeply disappointing every year. But there are a lot of grants out there, and our government has done a reasonably good job in terms of providing support for artists. Initially, it was pretty hard for artists to get support, and I think that our unions fought a bit of a good battle, and things are improving. There are avenues for keeping us alive. Well, I don't know about keeping us alive. I think a lot of companies are going to close because of this, and ultimately there will be a period of, I guess, the plague. We're dealing with the plague, but like with Shakespeare, I think we will rise like a phoenix from the ashes, and hopefully by the time we're in theatre spaces together, I think the electricity of that, the buzz of that, will be so overwhelming. I've read an incredible article, I think it was in The Guardian, about the right to assembly and our need to reconnect. And so I'm trying to keep that little ray of hope alive and look forward to those days. Although I've actually been teaching, and I got to direct some students in real life recently, and that was amazing, being in a rehearsal room again, working on some American scenes with some students. And yeah, the thrill of that for them too, because they'd been doing classes on Zoom for a while, and being actually back in a rehearsal room was such a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So feeling blessed in perspective.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting to be in perspective, because I mean, there's a lot of pain out there in the world right now, and at the end of the day, I've got supper on my plate and people to talk to and a computer sitting in front of me, and that's pretty good in the grand scheme of things.
Mm.
Skye, how's things for you?
I often will say, really, comparatively fine. Like I've lost months and months of work. That of course sucks. It hurts. I recently had a conversation with someone, and they weren't bemoaning it too much. But in terms of the CERB, if the CERB wasn't here for us in Canada, emergency relief, I'd be screwed. My family and I would be screwed. So the fact that we've been able to rely on that for help, it certainly doesn't cover everything. You just kind of tighten the bootstraps and don't spend as much as you normally would. We had gift cards that we hadn't used yet, like at Rona and things like that. And so I've been able to do some projects, like I built garden beds for my wife and added to the fire pit area in our backyard recently.
I saw your fire pit. It's looking pretty snazzy.
Yeah, thanks. So some of those things that I didn't have time to do last year because I was gone 4 months. I was in Winnipeg for 2 months and home for a week, and then in Ontario for 2 months. So yes, we don't get to do Mackers together or do Tempest, but trying to take the time to be able to be with my family, and then just recently having my mom get booked in for hip surgery, and like it was drop everything and get it done. Had we been doing the shows, it would have been an issue, but I'm here to help. So I'm kind of looking for those little positive aspects of this whole situation.
Yeah.
So one of the other topics that I'm curious to hear folks' thoughts on is, I mean, there's a lot of talk, especially when the pandemic began, of comparing what Shakespeare wrote during the pandemic and Lear and these sorts of things, and that was an early topic. So kind of one half of this question is, what do you think Shakespeare would be writing about or thinking about in this world today? And then I'm also curious to hear, on a similar vein, when we're back and we're in a big rehearsal hall and we get to do Tempest or Mackers or Comedy of Errors or whatever it is that we end up doing, what do you think will have changed in our minds that will have us approaching the text differently? Do you think we'll be approaching the text differently when we come back out of this? Do you think we'll have gained some kind of an insight that we can bring to the words?
Well, having worked recently with these students, and we had social distancing in place. It was American scenes, but I think it can relate. They weren't allowed to have any physical contact on stage, and I think that was a huge challenge. But also, interesting things came out of it. Interesting choices were made. So I'm wondering if, when we return to doing Shakespeare, our appreciation for the physicalization of the language or how we stage it might be affected by this distancing, and every moment of physical connection, if we're allowed it, will be so potent. And I think, I imagine that, what we do with our bodies transforms our voices as well. And so I think there will be something quite powerful about the physicalization of Shakespeare, maybe. Something to look forward to. And on your other question, I think if Shakespeare were writing now, he'd be writing about love. I'm a hopeless romantic, but still, he'd have to be writing about what connects us and the shared humanity and all the problems with love, of course, but also the good things. Maybe he'd be writing a comedy just to get us through this, a plague of love or something.
Yeah, it the holding those physical moments very dear, that's a really wonderful thought. I often think about, and you were kind of speaking about it earlier too, of when an audience is able to come back into a theater and have a collective experience again, I hope that people will be more conscious of that gift. I think in this day and age, we don't really think much about it. We flood into the theater, or we flood into a movie theater, or wherever we go, and we don't realize how fortunate we are to have a collective experience with a group of artists and an audience. But it's also really wonderful to think that that when two actors can come together on a stage and have a physical moment, that is a more special thing, that it's a more appreciated and unique thing. I mean, that's a lovely outcome to come out of something like this.
Yeah, well, we will also probably appreciate seeing more than just people's heads, you know?
Yeah.
We actually see bodies, and how, you know, the language that we convey with our bodies informs so much. Yeah, I think that'll hopefully be a really exciting thing. Oh, bodies! Wow.
that aren't doing this all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I hope that, you know, that we won't take the rehearsal process for granted too. You know, I hope they won't be like, oh God, I got called right at 10. It's like, after being not allowed to rehearse for so long, it's just get me back in the hall. I just want to be with other artists and get to work.
Yeah,
I'm sure that'll be part of it too. I'm missing the collaborative process.
Yeah. I was about to start rehearsing The Merchant of Venice, and then a few weeks ago the director called me and he was like, what do you think? Do you think we should start to looking for funding or something? And I was like, I don't think that's good already. I don't think we would be able to do the Merchant of Venice that we wanted to do, because we don't know how the theater is going to be next year. We don't know how many people we will have on the audience. We don't know if we're going to have a vaccine or something, so people will feel comfortable to be inside a theater with a lot of people. And we don't know how it's going to be to do a show with 14, 15 actors. So I think it's best for us, for the whole show, to wait a little bit more and make it when we are sure that the actors can kiss. When it's okay for them to kiss, then we do The Merchant of Venice, because I want them like kissing. I want Portia kissing Bassanio. I want that. Yes.
Amazing.
And I think that's the thing, because as you guys says, with the body, when you want to see this human contact, like you want to see people hugging, people kissing, because we are missing it so much nowadays. And I think it's going to be important for people to see it.
I think the cat was missing it.
Yeah. Like a shark fin.
Bound to have in his little cameo, Dante's cameo.
That cat has such great timing. I love it.
I think Shakespeare would be writing about politics as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would love to see him writing about my president, something more like Titus Andronicus. Maybe his sons ending up inside a pie. That would be lovely.
I mean, you should say that's exactly what I'm rereading right now. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think politics would be, I mean, obviously politics was pretty inherent to a lot of his works back then as well, but you know, and Shakespeare had such an interesting way of writing about the politics in different countries as well, and I often wonder what that would be like now when he'd be actually flooded with information from the politics from other countries, you know, much more saturated firsthand media exposure to, you know, what the Brazilian president is doing or what the American president is doing, you know, all these kinds of things. Whether they'd be a farce, a comedy, or a tragedy, it's hard to say, but yeah.
I think a lot of his stuff will resonate differently too. Like I've been rereading at least one play a week as part of this other kind of group that I've been meeting with, which has been a lifeline. But all of a sudden we're realizing like, oh my God, like, because he was writing such and such a play, even something like Love's Neighbor's Lost that we talked about last week. references, things like, oh, he wrote that, around the time of the plague in, the early 1590s, and just every now and then a line will come out and it just sounds different. It lands different because it's a reference to plague or a reference to disease.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that we'll probably have a few more of those for ourselves, even though it'll be in a slightly different context.
There's also, there's that track through history of this play or that play was much more commonly done in certain centuries or certain time periods because it resonated. And I have no guesses, but I'm curious to see which ones start to come to the top and which ones go down. We did a production of Titus a couple of years ago, and that same sort of 2-year period, there was a ton of Titus productions across Canada. For whatever reason, everybody was feeling like that was the one that resonated with them. And I'm curious which ones are the next to come around because of all this. It's also, at Shakespeare on the Saskatchewan, the way our timeline works, we pretty soon have to start deciding what we're going to do next summer, assuming we can do something. And it becomes such a strange and difficult conversation to imagine what kind of an outlook on the world we might think we have 8 months from now, and to start figuring out, are we doing the shows that we tried to do in 2020, or are we doing something else? Or I had this horrible dream / nightmare the other day. We're just finishing building a brand new venue that we were supposed to have used this summer, and sadly don't get to use it. And then of course now I'm looking at next summer and saying, well, I'm not sure I can actually do a show in a tented venue because COVID protocols just won't allow me to. So how, is it going to be outside, or what are we going to do? And I had this horrible nightmare where it was a glass box, like a plexiglass box, like you'd see in a museum for for a curated piece, and like 6 audience members sitting 20 feet away from this glass box while they did Mackers inside the box. And it was so depressing. It was so sad.
Well, actually, the company meeting that I have later today is making our decisions about our summer season. And we actually do an outdoor Shakespeare festival. Obviously, our summer is coming up in 6 months, and 5 months really. Probably just next week, actually. It's not that cold. And unfortunately, I think it's not going to be able to go ahead just for financial reasons, even though it's an outdoor venue, we would have been able to cope. But this student production that I just worked on, they had an indoor performance, and they had the seats down 1.5 meters apart. And even if you came as a pair, you still had to sit 1.5 meters apart. And it was really interesting. I think I felt nervous that particularly the comedies wouldn't resonate because everyone's sitting so far apart. There's that scary thing of, will someone laugh if the person next to them is not laughing? But quite amazingly, I think, everyone was just so happy to be in a theatre that had their temperature checked on the way in, they were hand sanitized, and they had to sit in those seats or the show wouldn't start. But there was laughter, and there was that really great feeling. So I think, there's going to be ways to make it work. It's just a problem for those smaller theatres where, it's not necessarily financially viable to miss every few seats. That's I think the most difficult thing. But there's also lots of talks of rehearsals, being in bubbles. The group has to go into a bubble, that kind of thing. Of course, they're doing that with the sport right now here in Australia. Yeah. All the football teams get to continue doing their work, fully supported by the government, because, it's sport. But they have to stay in a bubble and not, socialize outside that bubble. So maybe that's something for us to do too. I think all those couples where the partners are actors together will be, living the dream.
Yeah. I told Skye he gets to do all of Saskatoon's theater seasons next year because he's got 3 actors in the family, so they're just going to do all the shows.
Yeah. Christy Piper and I were just going to run the canon of whatever we can come up with between the 3 of us.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I know time flies, but that's about our time. Unfortunately, that felt really quick. But when are you coming to Canada?
Oh, good question. I've been wanting to go to Canada for years. When are you going, Carol? Let's go together.
Yeah, let's do it. But it probably is going to take a while because no one wants Brazilian in their country.
I think we're still welcome
We are
everywhere. We're
dangerous.
probably not allowed out of the country.
No.
No, we are allowed to go outside. We are not allowed to
Visit anywhere.
go inside. Yeah, people don't want us. Not a Brazilian. No. Come back when you're, I don't know, English.
Well, I will say the Zoom doesn't quite cut it, so it's always better when people can meet in person. That's one of the things that was great about the whole situation, was meeting so many people from around the world, that you realize, even though it was like a dead white male playwright from hundreds of years ago, that it was still a connection for people of different languages and different ethnicities and age ranges. You know, it is a pretty uniting factor. So
Yeah.
we'll eventually be all in the same room.
Are there any plans for any more of the International Actors Ensemble?
No, not at this stage, although, you know, there's lots of very active team members who are, you know, always thinking of ideas and pitching things. Actually, David's doing some play readings and with some high-tech international things. I haven't been part of them. Do you know any more, Skye or Carol? Have you been part of the play readings?
Carol's been a bit more involved than I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing every 2 weeks, he's doing like a reading, the historical plays. And then when it's done, it's going to be Much Ado. And that's it. I think, and David also had like a project, like, but not online, for King Lear, and I don't know how it's gonna be. And also in Brazil, I have a project for Midsummers, and but I don't know how long it's gonna take for us to all be here in Brazil working together, because Brazil. I'm sorry.
There'll probably be an influx of smaller projects too, not just with the ensemble. I just anticipate that. It's like, I'm already looking at like Measure for Measure with 4 actors, for example, right?
Oh, wow.
Things like that. Instead of doing it with 14, like you said, Carol, well, how can we do it in a smaller group?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us, everybody. It was great to meet you. Great to see you, Skye, even though you're down the road from me, but.
Oh, come on, we'll be talking woodworking projects soon enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, anytime. Awesome. Well, thank you so much to meet you all. It was great, great chatting, and I hope to meet you in person sometime.
Hopefully,
Yeah,
I'll meet
thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.